Welcome back to Purely IFS, a show that aims to support therapists and practitioners in using internal family systems as their primary approach with clients. I'm Gail Williamson.
And I'm Emma Redfern.
In today's episode, the second part of our focus on what change looks like in IFS therapy, we'll look at the external pressure to change that clients and therapists face, along with the concept of constraint release and the importance of encouraging our clients to do their own parts work in between sessions, as well as how do we handle it when a dominant protector just will not step back and allow any significant change.
So I'm reminded that while we're talking here about change, self has no attachment to an agenda. And IFS with individuals has 4 goals, which are freeing parts from their extreme roles, restoring or creating trust in self, and that's the capital S self, achieving more inner balance, harmony and wholeness, becoming more self-led, both inside and in the external world. But demanding change of parts and of people often causes the opposite.
Yes.
So treading carefully and with ecological sensitivity is important. It's also, I think, important to have an awareness of the paradoxical nature of change as intertwined or related to self-acceptance.
That actually it is first accepting parts, situations, etc., as they are that is more likely to lead to change than urgently chasing change. Maybe just to add that accepting is different to giving in. And for example, just putting up with a difficult situation, which clients can sometimes hear you as saying if you broach the topic of acceptance.
Great point, Gail. Accepting, as we're talking about it, is a form of welcoming. If things didn't change at some point as a result of IFS, then I imagine very few of us would continue as therapists or practitioners and invest our energy and focus on it. However, the subject of change really is a complex, multifaceted subject, as I'm sure listeners are beginning to appreciate after our first episode on this topic.
Not least because we and our clients also live in an external or everyday world reality in which certain changes, internally or externally, may be necessary. For example, the person who may need to lose weight for health reasons, or the person who's frequently lashing out in anger in inappropriate contexts such as work. And while clients may feel a lot of internal pressure to change from their fixer manager, they are often also facing a lot of external pressure to change from relatives or partners. In other words, the managers and relatives or partners will be trying to control and change the client in some way, which often has a significant impact in therapy. The client's managers will be urgently trying to meet expectations, but in so doing will slow down the work.
Sure, there can be an overt external pressure on a person to change from a significant someone in that person's life, in the client's life, which might even include their non-IFS therapist, who gets the idea that a piece of IFS might speed things along or deal with the trauma. It's like IFS is seen sometimes as a magic bullet or magic pill to take.
Yes, I'm sure many of us will have heard clients say something to the effect of, my boyfriend, mother, friend doesn't understand why I'm still in therapy after all this time. She was questioning whether it's working. And I don't think we can underestimate the effect of this on vulnerable parts or parts who are particularly sensitive to the approval of other people. Your client may be in a relationship with someone who doesn't believe in any therapy. Perhaps the partner comes from a culture where seeking therapy isn't normalized, And if they have parts strongly susceptible to other people's opinions and approval, then it may present a significant conflict for them. It can be something like this, I think, Emma, that's behind a sudden resistance that comes up. That when you explore more, you find that someone in the person's life has questioned the therapy's effectiveness, questioning, for example, how long it's taken, perhaps from a lack of understanding that therapy is, of course, not a quick fix. And I will usually take the tack of helping them understand that the partner, mother, friend also has parts, and that my client is likely on the receiving end of one of their manager parts who is pushing for the client to be fixed so that it won't feel so uncomfortable or overwhelmed.
Mm. And these explorations and conversations can be so important, Gail. And there are 2 points I'd make here regarding the duration of therapy and any urges to fix. The first, there is no perfection this side of eternity.
No.
No, we're all works in progress, and undoubtedly will depart this mortal coil with healing still outstanding. And the second point, the less parts drive and the more they relax, the further your system will journey on the path to inner harmony and balance. And it can be so helpful in supervision and consultation to notice parts with urgency around change. A common example I find shows up when supervisees spend time sharing how the client can't do this, can't do that, and not, I hasten to add, because they want to shame the client, but because a part in them, who they may not be aware of, feels insufficiently skilled and believes I'm not a good IFS therapist or I can't do IFS.
This part wants the client to change so that the therapist's own part can feel better about themselves. The part wants change in someone else's system.
Yes, and this is when it can be helpful to contract with a supervisee for a piece of inner work with the part who takes too much responsibility for another's healing. So we bring the focus back into the IFS professional system, what we call in IFS the U-turn. And I know I've mentioned the drama triangle before, but victim, rescuer, and persecutor type protectors will all want change, but they usually want it externally. That is, they want somebody else to change. And because such parts mistakenly believe change is what people do to each other, they often want their own internal change to come from someone or something outside of themselves too, i.e. you, their therapist.
I think that's why the U-turn, spelled Y-O-U in IFS, is so important. Getting clients to notice the part of them that, for example, a drama triangle protector is trying to help. So if I give one example, a client of mine who happens to be a therapist often talks about being able to pick up energetically from our clients before they even arrive for the session how anxious they are. She, the therapist, would then become very anxious, but part of her, likely a strong rescuer, empathic part, would say that this anxiety wasn't hers, that the anxiety actually belonged to her client. But when I get her to do a U-turn, often the therapist herself has parts who are anxious about something in her own life, or there's something about this therapist's client or their story that has triggered anxious parts of my therapist client.
Which is, of course, common and understandable, that parts of us will be triggered by our clients, and that then it is so valuable for us to do that U-turn and help our own parts.
Yes, and just to add that while I will always try and highlight to clients their parts focus on the external, I will normalize it too. Our parts just don't know until they meet self that there is someone on the inside who can help. So, of course, they look desperately outside for a redeemer, a rescuer, someone to blame, or a source of soothing. Of course, in IFS, change happens through releasing constraints. This is our concept of constraint release.
We could describe IFS as undoing changes that have already happened in a person's system for reasons of survival, but which are to the system's detriment, such as when parts take on burdened beliefs and roles in response to attachment wounding, trauma, etc. Also, exiles are locked away and lose their playful, innocent natures. Protectors harden their hearts and take on huge responsibilities, jobs, strategies they can be too young to carry and can't do so with flexibility and adaptation. And parts enter conflictual relationships that take up huge amounts of energy as parts use opposing strategies to bring balance to the system or maintain inner protection of exiles, and access to self-energy is blocked.
I always remember reading Irvin Yalom's The Gift of Therapy, where he wrote about how overwhelmed he felt when he first began practicing, thinking, how do I solve all of these problems clients are bringing? Until he realized that, as he wrote, my task was to remove obstacles blocking my patient's path. I did not have to do the entire job. I did not have to inspirit the patient with the desire to grow, with curiosity, will, zest for life, caring, loyalty, or any of the myriad of characteristics that make us fully human. No, what I had to do was to identify and remove obstacles. And for me now, this seems analogous to IFS constraint release. Although, of course, I wouldn't think of protectors as obstacles, and we are not trying to get rid of them. It's their roles that we're hoping to help them unburden. And thankfully, those changes you outline, Emma, that were made for reasons of survival can, of course, be reversed, undone, or released. Something written about in the book Unlocking the Emotional Brain, the second edition of which includes an IFS case study featuring the late Derek Scott at work.
And I think the concept of self-healing, that is the psyche's natural healing ability that can get overwhelmed or blocked, is important. But not all parts in us or in others know about this amazing capacity humans have.
No.
No. Parts can think that them counteracting another part's belief of I'm bad or I can't with the opposite will work, but it's highly unlikely. If the system hasn't been able to release such beliefs already, then the inner unburdening of constraining beliefs by the part itself using IFS, for example, is where the freedom and magic lies. It's not with another person or another part, it's self-healing.
I think that's a big part of what we hope to do, to switch parts, focus on the external for help, to really knowing and trusting that there is a powerful source of healing inside along with them. But this takes time. We're essentially taught by our culture to look outside for solutions, to religion, to meditation teachers, to self-help books, to some kind of authority or healing figure, or even a rigid exercise regime, or maybe to natural remedies or psychiatric drugs or some kind of imposed daily structure. Our parts will very understandably cling on to things like this, their thinking being, if I just keep doing this, I'll be safe or I'll be okay. This will help me.
And a major part of the transformation of IFS is that these parts get to know that they're not on their own like they thought, that self can be there for them. And sometimes when parts want change, they think in terms of a situation or a behaviour or a feeling stopping or being mended, whereas what IFS offers is a transformed relationship to self.
And as we know, that can be a tricky thing to communicate. Hope merchanting for that can involve many of the five Ps or all of the five Ps. For example, we might need to persist and keep coming back to that possibility of a relationship with self. Or we may judge that actually it's best to lean into our patients and wait a little before we offer such hope merchanting.
Sure, because offering that hope too early can be counterproductive. Each client or each part might have a Goldilocks point when our offer of hope or any other intervention is just right, not too hot and not too cold.
Mm.
However, some therapists, some IFS professionals give up on hope if it's not grasped with both hands by a part the first time it's offered or raised, and they give up then on doing any more hope merchanting.
Yeah, it can be hard, I think, for parts of us when a strong protector in a client says in a very irritated way, yes, I know about this self, but I can't find it. And then our tendency might be to just drop the subject, when in fact what we need to do is patiently persist and just keep an ear out for opportunities where there might be more openness to some further discussion about self and the possibility of transformation and living with more ease. You reminded us earlier about self, Emma, about how it has no attachment to an agenda, and I wonder if it might be useful to say a bit more on this. Because when we say self has no attachment to an agenda, it's not that self is passive, like this Buddha-like presence standing by and observing, is it?
No, it isn't, Gail, and I'd make 2 points here briefly. Firstly, the qualities of self-energy are active. Curiosity, compassion, connectedness, and creativity, especially.
Absolutely. I mean, these are all inherently active qualities.
Sure. And secondly, and I write about this in the transitioning book, our parts can hold limited and distorted views of self, even projecting onto self the opposite qualities than those they offer and value.
Mm.
So, for example, a thinking part might conceive of self as brainless, passive, not be aware of self's clarity.
Yes, so often with clients, when we've gotten to the point of negotiating with a strong protector and raising the prospect of them meeting self, I'll hear that the protector conceives of self as something like an obelisk, a stone pillar, um, which they don't think can even talk. They really don't see it as active at all, and certainly not as capable of helping them or the other parts. So it's always a good point at which to do a bit of psychoeducating of the protector about the nature of self and what self offers. Now, I should probably put my hands up and say I can tend to be very biased when it comes to IFS, but I would also defend myself and say it's for a very good reason, having seen and experienced how transformative it is. But even I have to concede that occasionally you will encounter someone where their system just will not allow any meaningful change. It's happened so rarely, I can only recall 3 clients this has happened with.
And you're talking about times when IFS could be described as having failed, except that's not probably how I would see it.
Me neither. After all, it's not as if we can somehow force parts to step back or agree to change.
Hmm. So it's where someone has a very controlling protector who runs their system and will not allow consistent access to self, or for whom it's hard to experience enough safety, either internally or externally, to free up parts from roles or liberate them from scenes they're stuck in.
So this is the part that, for example, will come in consistently every time you try to help the client get to know a different part. So it might, for example, be speaking for each part. You will be doing your usual thing of guiding what questions the client asks the target part, and you begin to notice that the answers are coming very quickly and that there is a lot of detailed description. There's no sense of self being attuned to the part and really listening.
Yes, and at some point I'm going to be curious. Are you hearing that directly from the part or? And potentially at that point, the presence of a protector who is dominating the narrative will come to light. It's almost like a part is outed. And I know some therapists can be uncomfortable with that.
Yes, because the part itself can become quite defensive when it realizes that it's been spotted. And I think any therapist who finds challenge or confrontation difficult will struggle with the resistance or irritation that they pick up from the outed part.
Absolutely. But the idea in IFS is to have parts give space for self to become present and accompany and excel through the steps of healing. So once the part's presence is noted, we can patiently spend time with it, appreciating it, addressing its concerns, and finding ways to collaborate with it for the benefit of the system.
However, with
Mm.
some clients, it may seem like the dominant protector is just going nowhere. Often, the primary focus of such parts is control. They've always had to be in control, or to put it another way, they've always had to do whatever they can to help the client feel in control. Likely because things were so out of control or chaotic in the past. And so the idea of ceding control is understandably terrifying to them.
Mm.
Now, of course, we can do what we know generally works. We can acknowledge, validate, hope merchant, and negotiate, and be patient, give a part a lot of time. But we need to hold in mind that we cannot control whether this part will ultimately be willing to allow any change to take place internally. In two of the three clients who I referred to earlier, this control was the reason why they ended their therapy. But in case it's useful, in the third person's therapy, it was an extreme skeptical part that just took over. At the time, it was unfortunate that I hadn't yet developed the skills to negotiate with such a protector through explicit direct access. And so this protector caused the client to doubt everything they were experiencing internally, but also to doubt IFS and to become worried that it was some kind of cult. Now I would know that this is actually something you may hear frequently from strong skeptical parts, who of course cause the person to doubt and question everything, including IFS, as a way of keeping the person safe.
The part's positive intention in questioning everything being to make it less likely the person gets something wrong or takes risks or makes any changes. And some of our protectors really do not like change. And the protectors are probably reacting to something bad that happened in the past as a result of not questioning everything.
And actually, you may frequently meet protectors who say they don't even know how to change. For example, how to relax back and let self lead. This is often what you will hear during negotiations with the dominant manager that we've been speaking about, where you get to a point with this part where it is saying in response to hope merchanting that it feels now it would be okay to sit back. It's maybe even saying that it really wants to sit back and let self begin helping one of the parts it protects, but that it just doesn't know how. And here it's about reassuring the protector that when it truly feels okay to sit back, or at least pull back its energy a little bit, it will be able to. So I'm saying something like, it's all right. When you feel ready to sit back, you will just be able to. It would make sense to me that maybe you just need more time to trust that it is okay to sit back and take a break when Mary is with me each week. But also, it may be that you really need to better know the self that we talk about, the one who will come in when you do pull back. And then, of course, I continue working to facilitate that self to part connection.
And you're talking here, Gail, specifically of how to respond to a protector that is claiming it doesn't know how to step back, which may have the effect of engaging a therapist figuring out parts to work out how to tell the protector the mechanics of stepping back. But actually, it's not about this. It's about hearing that the protector doesn't have sufficient trust yet to ease back. However, it might be good to remind listeners that we go into more detail about the step back process in general in episode 12 of the podcast, where, of course, it doesn't have to be a binary thing, whereby it's either self or a part driving the inner psychic bus. Dick Schwartz talks about there being a critical mass of self present. So speaking to a protector about pulling your energy back a little or dialing it down a notch for now can help them maybe scooch over to a front passenger seat of that inner psychic bus rather than having to get off altogether or be banished to the back of the bus near the toilet, which isn't what we're talking about.
No. So we are talking about how we can help a part feel safe enough to allow self-presence. Attending to external safety can be part of that too, as an aid to or instead of internal change. After all, we're not advocating an either-or situation here. The change happens only on the inside or only on the outside.
Yes, and sometimes something outside of a person needs to change, and that needs to be factored in or attended to first or during inner work. For example, it can be helpful to create distance in certain external relationships while doing inner work, maybe reducing contact with someone that feels burdensome or activating, or perhaps limiting time with friends whose firefighter activity matches yours if you're seeking to get to know your firefighter.
Yes, I think it's so important not to get so focused in on the client's internal world that we overlook the external, particularly with clients whose external worlds may be very challenging or re-traumatizing in some way. I will say to them that while, yes, there is a lot of good work we can do with their parts, that if they are, for example, still living in a situation that's maybe strongly reminiscent of a traumatic childhood situation, then that's going to make it very hard for their protectors in particular to trust that it is safe now for them to relax.
Mm. Yes, and then there are other services available or activities clients can do to help harness or assist change, not necessarily with urgency. For
Mhm.
example, having body work or physiotherapy alongside, journaling, joining a choir, getting a pet, or even doing a volunteer job, or something you've always wanted to do but never done until now. Ultimately, though, it's important we prioritise the person or system in front of us and their needs and wants regarding changes that may be possible for them.
Before we end, I actually asked a long-term client of mine if she could write a paragraph for this episode on what she felt had changed for her. She's healed many exiles who suffered at the hands of a cruel mother and various other childhood traumas in the 7 years that we spent together. Anyway, she ended up writing 3 pages, but the bit that I'm going to read here is possibly the best description of self-energy that I've read. So she writes, early in my journey with IFS, I sometimes experienced a sense of bliss after unburdening a particular part and would want to squirrel away from real life and people to hold on to the feeling as long as I could, almost like you would with a new, exciting lover. Over time, the peak of the bliss may have plateaued, but each time we unburdened another part or helped another protector relax, that energy began to convert to what I would describe as a beautiful pool of water. This water has absorbed many energy droplets from all the parts we've helped over time, and that adds almost an amazing bioluminescence quality to the pool, like you see in the sea in the summertime, if you're lucky. Each time those droplets are added, the pool grows and it's now become a peaceful lake. This lake is an amazing resource for me, and I go there often. At times it is a cool and refreshing balm, and at other times it is like a hot spring where I take my bruised mind, body, and soul to heal and recover. The longer I do IFS, the easier it is to access. This lake has also become my third eye, offering a perspective beyond the duality of head-based logic and gut-based intuition. There is no chaos in the lake, no inner civil war, no chatter. It feels wise and at times serene. The lake never leaves, even when one or more of my very strong dominant protectors are firmly running the show. This is where some real IFS magic happens because it still allows me to hold space for them and some compassion for them while they are in full flow. I never thought I would gain this level of peace inside of me and could never comprehend when, for example, Maya Angelou said, "You need to have a place in you that's pristine, clean, and inviolate, and that this pristine place may be the place you go to meet God." I'm not a religious person, but I do now understand how the profound connection I once felt out in nature has become something I carry within me. This sacred, peaceful place has enriched my life in ways I never thought possible, and for that I will always cherish IFS.
Wow. Thank you, Gail. Thank you both for sharing that. And this client really has experienced the transformation that IFS offers. And I think you would say that her experience also highlights how valuable it is for clients to be with their parts between sessions and not just rely on the weekly therapy hour.
Absolutely. I mean, she is someone who has, from the word go, included her parts in her everyday life.
Which is, of course, what we're hoping to encourage in clients and in ourselves, to see this as a practice for living. But what does it look like in her case, Gail, to give listeners a better idea of what we're talking about?
Well, whatever part or parts we met in any given week, she'd do things with them during the week that followed. Sometimes it might be a protector who appeared quite intimidating initially and who didn't believe that there was someone else inside who could possibly be capable enough to do what they did. So Luca would do what she could during the week to earn the protector's trust and build their relationship. For example, she'd talk to the part and showed her helping an animal. She's involved in some animal rescue, or she may have stood up for herself or someone else during the week, and she'd check in with the protector afterwards and make sure that they'd seen this. Or if we were working with an exile, during the week she would often go on trips to places that were meaningful to her and the exile to show the little girl. Or she'd take the exile swimming. And recently she even took part in a bit of a pub crawl.
Huh? So essentially, she's maintaining awareness of the part she's working with at any given stage in her work and talking to them inside and explicitly including them in her life. Also, when Lucas spoke of there being no civil war at that inner lake, it sounds like she's been able to help her system navigate any internal conflicts, which might show up as a part being healing, as being that part shutting up, or this part stopping X or Y.
Exactly. And I think it's been a key thing in terms of her system developing trust in self, being aware of her parts, but also relationships between her parts.
So thanks again for joining us on Purely IFS.
We might take a bit of a longer break over the summer before our next episode, but next time we're going to get into the fascinating area of legacy burdens.
Such a transformative practice. Enjoy the summer and bye for now.
Bye, everyone.